Hey, welcome Court Club members. We got a treat for you this month. By the way, it's Ed Rush Jr. Joining you on the call. I got my dad, Ed Sr. and Rob Work with our special guest, Joe Maddon. Really a guy that needs no introduction. Today we're going to talk about managing expectations, how to step up into new places on the court, how to manage pressure. And we're going to go round robin and talk to a World Series champion about what he does to help his players really get into the zone. Little background, Joe Maddon joined the Angels organization back in 1975. He became the manager of the Rays back in 2006, took them to an American League championship in 2008. Recently joined the Cubs in 2015, went to the NLCS and won that in 2015. Then in 2016, as you might remember, broke a very long World Series drought in Chicago and became a little bit of a Chicago a sort of hero when they won the World Series in 2016. More than that, Joe's a friend of Court Club. He's been with us before to share his expertise. And more than that, he's a friend. My dad and I have known Joe since I think I was 16 years old, playing out at that Angels ballpark in Mesa when Joe was running camp that I was a young baseball player at. So, Joe, welcome. We're really, really honored just to have you here.
Eddie. Actually, I'm sitting in this apartment here in Long Beach, and I was going through some old boxfuls of stuff, and I found the schedule from the Southwest Professional Baseball School that you attended way back then. I thought about you and your pop, Eddie. Always there. You were so eager as a young player back then. We had the private hitting lessons on top of that at Mesa Community College. Believe me, brother, I remember all that stuff, and thanks for having me on board here.
So Joe gave me a bag of wooden bats. Back in the early 90s, we were doing some hitting. And my kids are in Little League right now. They just did their tryouts last week, and those bats are sitting outside. I have a tee set up with a net. So just so you know,
after bats are still,
what's that?
Bats are still in one piece.
Most of them are still there. You know, it's wood, so it's taken a little bit of a toll, but they're still in one piece. So generationally, so thank you for that. Hey, let's get down to the content. So the first question I've got is about arriving at a new place. So we've got referees that maybe they're not in Division I yet, maybe they haven't been on the Final Four stage yet, but every time they go to a new level, they're stepping into a new place, a new camp, a new environment, a new court, a new level, and you certainly are no stranger to that. How do you help your guys? I mean, you're showing up right now as we're doing this interview. Joe's moving to the Angels as the manager for the Angels, and he's going to a new place. So how do you help your guys step into new environments and perform well as they move up?
Well, I'm going to go 101 for you right here from my perspective. I really think it's important to attempt to build relationships. Now, from a referee's perspective, I don't know exactly what that would mean, but for me, going into a new team, with me to my players back to me, it's got to be about building relationships first. A lot of conversation, a lot of interaction. When you start from that perspective, what happens is you start building trust between one another. And you really, in an organized situation like this, in an organization, to be successful, if there's not trust flowing both ways, it really is a hard time to flourish. And beyond what happens after that, then you can exchange ideas. So I go relationships to trust to exchange of ideas, and then I would imagine with the referees, it's really important to be able to accept constructive criticism. And until you've really gotten to the point of really trusting one another and exchanging ideas, then you could actually freely, openly be constructively critical of one another. And I look forward to it in my job. I encourage the players, if they have any issues, come talk to me, because I'm certainly going to go talk to them. But I think too many times people skip this first step. And it's a lot of times the simple things sound like, well, they're too simple, they can't possibly work. But I really believe in it. I really believe in, I've already done that. I mean, that's what I'm talking about. Before we started doing this, I was telling you about meetings, like separate micro meetings I'm having with guys. That's why I came out to Long Beach early before spring training. I got Jeremy Reed coming up this week with Dave Snow, former coach at Long Beach State. Rick Ingles, a former scout, a lot of guys that work with or around the Angels. Jeremy's my hitting coach right now. About 7 guys all together, and I just want to build this relationship. And because I know these guys are going to be very helpful during the course of the year, and I know they're going to give me suggestions. So if you skip that step, it can be very difficult, because I'm telling you, man, when you arrive at trust, a lot of things become possible.
But that's so true. I mean, Rob and I talk about this all the time with his situation when he went to the SEC, and how he had to, to the point where he had to be confident enough to start to communicate. Because referees will not do that initially. They have a tendency to be inward, and we're given an answer. It's a simple thing like just giving an answer, or a simple thing like, "Gee, I'm not sure I saw that," or maybe I missed that play. It takes a while to get to that point, but when they do, it works. It's effective. There's no question.
I mean, as a manager, I mean, when an umpire talks to me and we're straight up about the situation, I have no issue whatsoever. None of us are perfect. Actually, I'm working on two concepts right now. I want to be inconvenienced, and I want to really realize my imperfections. And I think if you really understand that, that's where growth occurs. So inconvenience is actually a really good word, and imperfection is what we're all about. Nobody's perfect. We strive to get to that point. But umpires that admit to me, maybe I didn't see it right, maybe I missed something, whatever. Those are the guys that I really want to umpire my games.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's a new one for you, Joe. I don't think I've heard that before. Listen, all your stuff. I mean, that's so. Let me go to something here that's really important in the referee world. It's expectations.
Yeah.
Here's what we find. We find that number one, there are people that come and they are they have such expectations that are almost unrealistic. Mm-hmm. That their disappointment is almost immediate. It's unreal. So managing through that, and then when the expectations are unfulfilled, like, gee, we failed. I failed. I went to camp. They were supposed to hire me. The Big Ten said they were going to hire me, and no, I never got the note. I didn't get hired. What right. My expectation? I'm deflated. So this happens to our members all the time.
Happens to us all the time. I mean, you know me from way back in the 1980s. It's all about process. It's about never giving up. And if you have self-confidence, if you believe in what you're doing and how you do it, you could overcome those moments. I was passed up so many different times to get to the big leagues. I can't even count them all. There was times I wanted to leave the Angels because I thought it was unfair. If you're waiting for fairness, you're going to wait a really long time. So you're going to be dealing with unfairness often. And I think part of your job is kind of to be rather thick-skinned anyway. So I love expectations, as a matter of fact. I encourage expectations. I tell my players there's two words that you always want to run towards, and that is pressure and expectations. Normally, if pressure is involved, if high expectations are involved, it means you're going in the right directions. It means you're chasing something that you really want and is eventually going to become very fruitful. Managing expectations, for me, that would be something I would do with the press. When maybe things don't actually turn out, or somebody starts to get a little bit too full of themselves or ahead of themselves, you might have to reel them back in, possibly. But the best way I could describe pressure and expectations to you guys is that I love them, and if it's part of my day, then it means I'm definitely doing the right things right now. Never permit the pressure to exceed the pleasure. That's another thing. That's one of my gigs that I talk about. Realize if you're trying to become a big-time referee, it's probably something you've wanted to do for a while. So why would you permit any kind of pressure to exceed the pleasure of doing what you're attempting to do right now? I think sometimes you just got to catch yourself, breathe a little bit, get in a quiet room, and start rehashing. Why am I doing this? And why do I want to do this? How long have I wanted to do this? And understand it's not. And if it's not easy, that's another good thing. You don't want it to be too easy. I want to have to work for something and earn it. So never permit the pressure to exceed the pleasure. And if you hear the word expectation, man, run towards it. Mm.
So here's what happens in our world. This is good. Very good. So, we have these camps. I mean, camps are a big deal because it's how people hire. And so you go to Vegas, and there's some high-level players. And so we have a game in a side gym. There's nobody in the building, and we have people working. And so referee X and Y, they go out and they nail it. They're really good. But now we say, okay, now listen, tomorrow afternoon you're in Thomas Mack, and you're going to have the Sixers against the Celtics. Now, these are summer league teams, but still, it's televised games. Celtics against the Sixers. It's the same players you had in the gym where there was nobody there. We see many times, all of a sudden it's like, oh, deer in the headlights. Wait a minute, guys, relax. It's the same players. They have the same kind of plays. But for these environments have a tendency to affect people. And this is one of these things where we really constantly try to help people. And that's a big part of the mental skill series, trying to help people with those situations.
Absolutely. I mean, we have that same problem when the second and the third deck shows up for young players in a baseball park. They're very good on the backfields, and they can be really good in a minor league situation with one deck. But when it goes to the second and third deck and the lights get bright, all of a sudden what you're talking about occurs. I do believe in what you said, the mental skills component of this. I really believe under those circumstances, it happens to all of us, to me too. I mean, I like to play the game before the game's played, something I learned from Gene Mock. I meditated on this couch right here this morning for 20 minutes. I think if you could actually visualize in advance what you're attempting to do or wanting to do, whatever your job might be, and it could be as early as 8 o'clock in the morning for a 7 o'clock game, then you'd be surprised how that moment in the morning, which you focused on, which you really want to manifest during the course of the day, and how it comes to become true. So you start out, because that's your breathing. And the more you do that on a consistent basis, you're able to control your breath. If you can control your breath, you can control the second deck and the third deck, or Mac Arena versus a gym. I totally believe that stuff. It really, really starts with that. And the other thing is, I would suggest, and something that I encourage my players to do when we go to spring training in a couple of weeks, I want us to play the game the same regardless of the date. So if it's March 15th, then it becomes June 15th, and then October 15th when it's a playoff game. I want us to pretty much prepare and work the same way every day, regardless of the date. So I don't want to apply any more weight to any particular situation. The weight should be, when you learn how to apply the same amount of weight per day, then you can handle those moments better. That's the way I describe it to my guys. So I want the same mental and physical effort daily, regardless of the date. And when you're able to do that, you'd be surprised, man. I've had a lot of success in playoff games also, because what I'm telling you right now is exactly what I tell the guys the first day of spring training. So it's about not applying too much weight to a particular moment.
You know, that's interesting, Joe. So watching your teams play and very closely, and I try to relate to, the officiating world. That kid that you brought up from, I guess, single or double A to play shortstop for you at the end of the year, oh my. He acted, I mean, I think he showed up in San Diego. Was when you were here,
Right.
It looked like he'd been in the big leagues 5 years, right? And all of a sudden, so how do we capture that? I mean, that would be, we do that with a referee. He's ready to walk out there and command the room.
That's makeup. I mean, Nico walked in with that. He's a Stanford kid. He's very self-confident. Listen, I could go into the 5 levels of being a professional. I could do all that stuff. But Nico believed he belonged there. A, B, from my perspective to him, I did not fill his head with a bunch of different thoughts or items. I mean, he's gotten there for a reason. I think the mistake sometimes with young players, I don't even know if it's young referees, you try to overcoach them a little bit too soon, as opposed to letting them go out there and be who they are based on the training that they've had to that point. There's always time to pick it up and maybe point something out there in the course of the next couple of days. But I never want to send a guy into the game with too many heavy thoughts, too much information for me, or from our analytical department or whatever. I think our job is to call it down, pick out nuggets and disperse nuggets along the way. But when you try to put too much in a guy's head before a big moment, I promise you it's always going to end up badly. So he came in, I sat him down. They said, "Hey, brother, great to have you here. Make sure you know the signs. If you need anything, come see me. I will come see you, vice versa. But I want you to go play. I want you to take your game out there. I want you to go play. And I'll take whatever happens with that, and then we'll come and coach you along the way."
Well, that worked. Now, I want to kind of evolve, and you're going to talk about this 5 levels of professionalism before we wrap up. But I want to ask you first. So I call this mistake recovery strategy. There is no perfect game. The greatest referees in the world work at about 90%. So 1 out of 10 is probably going to be sideways. That's just the way it is. But I got to make sure that I don't link up one after the other, and I become a 50%er. So mistake recovery strategy to Joe Maddon.
Yeah, I mean, we all do. We all screw up, man. It's a part of the day. And I'm just telling you, I'm working on inconvenience and imperfection right now, and just accept the fact that those are a part of our lives, and also accept the fact that's where growth occurs. So if making a mistake, I'll give you an example. Not that it was a mistake, but the seventh game of the World Series, went after the home run by Davis versus Aroldis. I had to tell myself, get back in the moment now. I turned to Davey Martinez and I said, who's coming up for us next inning? I think the most difficult thing to do in those moments is it's not necessarily about the future. It's not about what's going to happen next. You continually obsess upon what you had just done wrong, and you got to get rid of that thought and get back to the present tense. So I always tell myself, my other big thing I'm telling myself these days is don't miss it. Don't miss it. I'm just going to go for my bike ride down here on the beach right now in a couple minutes. Okay, the Queen Mary's right over there. I go all the way to the other end of this thing, and I'm driving along, and all of a sudden I'll get obsessed in a lot of crazy thoughts, and then I'm not really seeing the wonder that's around me, and I say to myself, don't miss it. We have to stay in the present tense to be as good as we possibly can in regards to anything we want to do. So for me, it's not easy, but you have to train yourself to get back into the moment. You got to take that, you got to like tie that mistake around a big rock and throw it into the Pacific Ocean and forget about it. Anxiety lives in the future. You cannot live in the future because your mind will play tricks on you. You're gonna think a lot of negativity. There are some dudes out there that are gonna go positive on you, but the anxiety lives in the future for those that go to negative town. So you got to stay out of there. You got to stay right here, right now. Drop this bad moment. Live here right now. Believe that your training is going to take care of the future. And when you're able to get to that point, a lot of that is experience. A lot of that's been there, done that. A lot of that is okay, who's the next hitter kind of moments. And I think for you guys, it's got to be about this play, the next play, whatever. It cannot be about the one that occurred.
Right. Next possession. Right.
Right.
Okay. All right. So I want to get you on your bike so you can get out and enjoy the moment and the sunshine, etc. 5 levels of professionalism. I know that's your baby. The last time you were with us, we had more conversation about this. We talked about this for at least a year. And Rob, I think we probably should continue to revisit. Give us that if you would.
I got 5 on. That's my level 5 shirt. And I got that on right now. Okay, level 1, and this actually occurred. My thoughts occurred at Anaheim Stadium in 1995 in the basement in the manager's room with Marcel Latchman about 1 o'clock in the morning. That's when I thought this stuff. Level 1, happy to be here, brother. I am so happy. We all, in every profession that we're in, I don't care if it's professional sports, maybe you become a new attorney, whatever, as a professional, when you get to that point where you're in that spot that you want to be, you're going to be happy to be there. Number 2, very dangerous, survival. Survival is a very dangerous level in baseball in particular. I'm sure it's in your level too, because in level 2, it's not so much about winning, it's about not making mistakes. And so when you show up at the ballpark that day, you're kind of an appeaser. You're really not there with your mind in the present tense where you are there to make a difference in a positive way. You're just trying to not make mistakes. Man, I really like this. I want to stay here. This is great. And I think because of that, it elicits that response where you're attempting to not make mistakes as opposed to trying to win. Level 3, I belong here. I can do this. But already, that was brought up in the conversation earlier. Once you arrive at the point where you feel like you belong here and you can do this, man, the whole world opens up to you. Whatever that gym versus the Mac Center, you're able to take all that training, and all of a sudden it shows up because you know you belong here. You know you can do this, and you know you're one of the best. Level 4, and I don't slight anybody of this, and anybody that does, I'll challenge them on it. I want to make as much money as I possibly can. You've gone through this whole, listen, you're trying to take care of your family now, and in the future you might have a narrow window of opportunity. I don't know. But level 4, I want to make some dough. And level 5, all I want to do is win. And that's the thing. You're trying to promote level 5. Eric, the head coach at University of Arkansas basketball right now.
Eric Musselman, yeah.
Eric Musselman. Yeah.
He's adopted my they pass out a level 5 shirt to the player of the day game, and they wear a necklace afterwards. He sent me their version of it. All I want to do is win. When you get a bunch of those guys on the team at the same time, anything's possible. Excuse me. So level 1, happy to be here. 2, survival. 3, I belong here. I can do this. 4, want to make some money. And level 5, all I want to do is win. And it's almost like you have to go through those first 4 levels to arrive at that spot. There's all these guys going, oh, I want to do this one. Yeah, right. But when you really challenge them on it, and they really sat down and were very transparent, honest with you, they haven't arrived at that point yet. They have to touch these other steps first.
We're coming up on the 20-minute mark, and Joe, we're going to get you back on the bike. I'm going to throw one question to you at the end, just a general question. What kind of advice you'd have for our guys? What you just said reminds me, when I was training to fly fighter jets, we had 3 levels of development. Level 1 was I screw everything up, and I have no idea why. Level 2 is I still screw everything up, but now I'm starting to figure out why. And level 3 is I start to see my screw ups ahead of me, and now I adjust around them. So maturity at all levels is pretty interesting. But when you get yourself to just win, then you're dialed in. So for our Court Club members, how quickly can you get yourself to the place where it's all about the game that you have in front of you? Joe, thanks for joining us. Any last minute thoughts for our referees before you head to the streets?
Yeah, I mean, it's just it's a matter of it really comes down to self-confidence. Trust yourself, trust your training, trust what you're seeing. Believe in yourself. I mean, when you arrive at that particular point, you can become a big league player. You can become a big league referee. I know there's a lot of doubt, like you just talked about, just getting to that level where you do trust what you're seeing and believe it. It takes time. Be patient with yourself. And if you're getting your teeth kicked in a little bit, that's okay, because we all have.
Joe Maddon, thank you for joining us. We're going to do a second segment here. Dad and I and Rob, just with some thoughts on what Joe just said, but we're going to get him out on his bike, man. Thank you so much, brother.
We'll see you at Diablo next month or month of March.
All right, guys. All right. Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me. Thank you.
All right, hey, welcome, members. We just did an interview with Joe Maddon, and Rob and I and Dad wanted to just spend some time reflecting on what Joe just talked about. In other words, in the interview, we wanted Joe to be the one speaking and sharing his expertise, but we also wanted to reflect on what he said and make some specific applications to you and your career. And so here we are. And I took a whole bunch of notes. I got a whole page full of notes. Certainly not enough. Certainly too much to go through in such a short period of time. But let me just talk about one of the things that Joe talked about, and it actually dovetails with a few things that I'm teaching right now, and it ties directly to what I talked about in this summer in camp. If you watched our mental game series, you saw that recording. So I'm actually going to jump on the whiteboard real quick and just talk about, Joe mentioned when he was in the World Series, that home run off of Chapman, and how instead of being upset, because he could have been upset at himself, he took that moment and said, all right, who's coming up next, to talk to his bench coach. And he talked a lot about being in the present. You remember when he said, don't miss it, don't miss it. He was getting ready to go on his bike, right? Don't miss it, right? Don't miss it. And so what happens is, as athletes, as referees, as competitors, we make a mistake when we link. This is the present here, this is the past, and this is the future. And we make a mistake oftentimes. We link the past and the future to the present. Here's a mistake we make. And he talked about it. A lot of times when we look into the future, we bring with us things like anxiety and worry. Okay, and a lot of times when we look into the past from the present, we bring with us things like regret or doubt or discouragement. Okay, and those things fundamentally are not helpful in the present, because there's a lot of second guessing. There's a lot of, oh man, I wish I hadn't done that. You can tell body language wise, if you do this movement, if you're like that, oh man, like that movement right there, that is a regret movement in the past. Now, as an athlete, as a referee, as a competitor, there are things in the past you need. Great referees are great referees because they've built a wealth of experience and pattern recognition. And those are actually the two things that you need, right? So when you come from the past, this is an illegal exchange: regret, doubt, discouragement. When you come from the past, what is legal is experience and pattern recognition. The reason I distinguish those two is experience is a conscious mind action. Pattern recognition is a subconscious mind action. This is you as a referee down the baseline in the lead, and you see a player come across the key, and that player that's coming across the key, as you see another player come into a convergence, this is something you've seen over and over and over again. And you're not anticipating the call, you're anticipating the play, but as that happens, you're bringing forward pattern recognition. Okay. And then from the future, what you're allowed to bring backwards is dreaming and planning, right? So people who are really big on mindfulness and say, you need to be in the present. Sometimes people forget, man, I got a trip that I'm taking this week. Sometimes you got to make some plans to take that trip. Okay. So here's the past, the present, and the future. Now, what Joe is talking about in terms of dealing with the pressure is being in the moment that you're in. And so, Dad, when you asked the question about mistake recovery, I mean, I thought it was great. Instead of making about his players, Joe talked about what potentially could have been the biggest mistake in his life. But that mistake he actually took into the present and took into an adjustment. And they had that nice rain delay actually to make that adjustment. And I thought that was great. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I mean first place, we talk about referees. We in the learning pattern, we talk about being transparent and how important that is when we open up and we share with people that we trust. And Joe did just his time with us. He did that. I mean that was pretty cool. That was probably the most high wire act time of his professional career. And he opened up and about the potential for tremendous anxiety. So, that was powerful. Anything, Rob, on that?
No, I think that's really good. It really brings it all together. And from an officiating standpoint, and somebody that's kind of in the grind with the members right now, can appreciate all that Ed just did to connect. And it makes a lot of sense because I've found myself at times when I struggle, it's because I'm looking to the present or looking beyond the present to the future, and undoubtedly that self-doubt creeps in, or you think about an experience that you had in the past, where maybe the last time you were at a particular arena or you had a particular game or team and it didn't go well, and now you have that team or you're in that arena again and the environment's the same, without doing what Joe had mentioned was the meditation and the visualization, and without using something like that, that doubt can easily creep in.
So the two more things real quick. Just I want to take that Joe said and just connect them. So it's 5 levels of professionalism. Happy to be here. Survival mode. I belong. I can do this. Make as much money as I can. And finally, number 5 is just win. I just want to win. And he talked about breathing in his meditation practice. So I want to pause for a moment and just talk about number 2, because number 2, I think, is one of the things that gets in the way of progressing referees. Okay, so what I mean by that is refereeing in high school, you start refereeing championship games, you get into JUCO, next thing you know, you're working better games. Next thing you know, you're in Division II, you're working better games. Next thing you know, you're with Rob in Division I, you're starting to work on Saturday. Next thing you know, maybe you're pushing to get into the tournament. And that would be a career trajectory that a lot of our referees would like to take. But along the way, you find yourself in situations where maybe you feel out of place. Maybe you feel like, gosh, I've never been in front of 20,000 people before. Or maybe for the first time, you've got a game where literally the entire season is on the line for two teams. And he said this stage number 2, survival. And I think one of the things he said about that is actually the most important thing. Survival, first of all, he said it was a dangerous place. The second thing he said is not to make a mistake, right? My goal in survival is not to make a mistake. And what's important about that is, Joe talked about focusing on the things in the morning on his meditation time that were going to affect his day, even if it was an 8 o'clock in the morning meditation and a 7 o'clock at night game. It didn't need to be months away. It may have just been hours away. But from a mind perspective, and some of you have heard me teach this before, but your mind essentially is a machine that is designed to go after targets. A way to think about your mind is like a missile coming off of an airplane. It's a seek and destroy target. And the target that you put in front of it is almost always the target that you're going to accomplish. So if your target is, man, I belong. This is me. I feel confident. I'm in the right place. I may make some mistakes here and there, but I'm going to recover from them quickly. If that's your target, your brain over time will begin to create that reality for you. If your target, though, number 2, was I don't want to make any mistakes. Here's the interesting thing about the subconscious mind. Your subconscious doesn't understand negatives. Okay, so for example, if I was to say to you, whatever you do, don't think about a big elephant whose trunk is pink. If I say to you, don't think whatever you do about a pink elephant whose trunk is pink, the first thing that pops into your mind is a pink elephant whose trunk is pink, right? If I say to my kids, I have two boys, 13 and 11. If I say to my boys, whatever you do, don't get angry at each other today. Well, they have to picture in their mind getting angry at each other. And all of a sudden they're creating a reality in their head that will express itself in the future because the mind deals with images. Okay. So in survival mode, if it's don't make a mistake. So I heard, I won't even say who it is, but I heard one of the leading coordinators in all of college officiating, his overarching advice to his referees was don't F it up. That was it. That was the whole advice. And he said the word. If you say that enough times, your referees will have in their mind the picture of effing it up when you tell them don't F it up. And it's inevitable that's gonna happen. So I want to link that really quickly to his discussion of breathing. And I'm going to go down this road. It's going to take me, Dad, another 45 seconds to a minute to do this, and I'll pitch it back to you. The interesting thing about breathing. So for example, your heart right now, your heart is beating on its own. There's not much you can do to control the heart. However, with breathing, you can actually take your heart rate down, or you can take your heart rate up. Breathing is sort of the key that unlocks some operations inside of your body that work on its own. Okay, and the reason for that is breathing, for the most part, is an operation that your body does on its own. For example, right now, you were just breathing during this entire interview, probably not thinking about your breathing until I just started mentioning it, and now you're thinking about your breath, right? So breathing is one of those things I can control it if I want to, but most of the time it's not, okay? And your brain and your heart work the same way. So for the most part, your thoughts are going, but then when you stop to begin to control your thoughts, you're taking control over something that doesn't actually normally operate that way. And because breathing is something that you can control that normally operates on its own, you can also control your heart and your mind with your breath. That's why breathing's so important. And so one of the practices that I've been doing recently is called box breathing, or 4 square breathing. 5 seconds in, 5 second hold, 5 second out, 5 second hold. And there's apps that you can use online to help you through that. I do that for 5 minutes a day. What it does is it centers and focuses the mind on the thing that you want to focus on. So maybe a practice that you can start, maybe every morning. I do this in my chair now for about half an hour a day. Every morning, do your breathing, right? Practice a little breathing exercise. It doesn't have to be 5 by 5 by 5 by 5. It can be 6 seconds in, 4 seconds out. Okay. Either the point is to consciously control your breathing for a certain period of time, and then put thoughts in your mind that are positive thoughts. So for example, a positive thought for you could be a perfect trail to lead transition, where now you're in a perfect position to accept this play coming down. Okay. Another perfect visualization for you, maybe to see a play, you see a block charge, you know that it's a block, you call a block, you go through your whole signal series all the way to the table in your mind. Okay. You're just practicing this stuff. And what happens is it takes you really quickly past that survival mode right into number 3, I belong, I can do this. Dad?
So how about the core club members? You kind of have a choice here. No, you can be shackled by your fear of failure, or you can step up and mindfully go through and develop the habits that we talked about. There's a lot of information here that, when applied, implementation will make a major difference in you overcoming the things that will happen to you. It will happen, right? So we know that we can't control that, but we can control how we respond. So great job. I enjoyed being with you guys. We're going to make this into a can't miss program. We're going to ask people to watch it multiple times, because we're going to see a major difference. So let's have a great week.